Ratchet & Clank is a game series that played a huge role in shaping me into who I am today. I played the first Ratchet & Clank for the PlayStation 2 when I was just 2 years old, the obstacle course in Metropolis being my first actual memory. I've since played every single game in the series, and trust me, there's a lot of Ratchet & Clank games out there. Come think of it, if I had a nickel for each time a yellow furry creature played a huge part in my life, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, definitely not in today's economy, but it's really weird that it happened twice. Rift Apart though was a different story. After the really disappointing, reboot of the original game...
Do me a favor, when you use it, post your thoughts on the social medias. The kids love their social medias. Hashtag Gadgetron.
Oh my god. And Insomniac's success with Spider-Man, I thought we weren't gonna get a new entry in the series whatsoever. And then, during the reveal of the PlayStation 5, this happened.
You alright back there? No way.
It was incredible. Everything about it looked like it was gonna be the best Ratchet & Clank game in the whole series. And so, the wait began. And then the PS5 went out of stock worldwide in the first 10 to 15 seconds. Sony's next generation console was now either completely unattainable or cost more than a few months worth of rent. Great. And at one point, I thought I'd never even play Rift Apart. It was really tempting to see the reviews or watch a playthrough on YouTube, but I wanted to experience it for the first time completely on my own. So for years, that original announcement trailer was all I knew about it. But then something peculiar happened in the games industry. Sony was all about their exclusives. Everybody knew their studios made amazing games and you needed a PlayStation to play them. So it was a total shock to everyone when they suddenly announced they were going to bring their entire catalog to PC. We saw announcements for a bunch of PS5 titles coming out on Steam, and that list included, you guessed it, Rift Apart. You couldn't even imagine the kind of hype I had when I saw it, only to then be left without a computer I could play it on. Oh my god, life loves playing around with me like that sometimes. But finally, the planets aligned, and no, I am not sorry for that pun, and here I am, with a game I've waited to play for 3 long years since launch, and even longer before that. And oh boy, do I have some things to say. Which brings me to today's video. Hey folks, I'm Houbs. I talk about stuff I'm passionate about, and I can't believe I'm finally saying this, I'm happy to bring you my review of Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. Now, let me be clear for a second. Being a lifetime fan of this franchise means I can talk about these games for hours. But I don't think anyone would want to listen to me rambling for that long, so please, bear with me as I try to give this video at least some structure. And where better start than with the most obvious point. This is one of the most beautiful games ever made. Yup, there's absolutely no hyperbole here. Before I go into further detail, let me give you some context. Insomniac Games is known for taking PlayStation hardware and getting the absolute most out of it. The Golden Bolt actually has a great retrospective about the whole series, where he goes into every tiny trick Insomniac pulled to make each game look and play as great as they did. So their games became this benchmark, the best foot forward for each new generation. That means they were given all the resources and time to make sure this game is nothing short of a graphical powerhouse. And, gosh, I can't believe I get to play a Ratchet & Clank game that looks this good. But it's not just the raw graphical fidelity that makes it so gorgeous. Insomniac's attention to detail and art direction are second to none. Their games have this timeless feel to them. Even the original PS2 titles look barely aged, thanks to how well they used their resources to get the absolute best visuals that were possible at the time. Rift Apart is no exception. It looks unbelievable now, and it'll keep looking incredible for at least the next few decades. Now, I won't go full Digital Foundry on you. I'm not going to look at every single pebble and spend 20 minutes telling you why it's the greatest pebble to ever pebble, but I can definitely talk about how the game feels as a whole. You know how during presentations for new games, they do that slow pan across the screen to show how awesome their environments look? That's what I wanted to do every time I landed on a new planet. I started doing it just to make my footage look nicer, but then I actually stopped and admired the amount of work Insomniac put into these locations. All of it is highlighted by the lighting engine that makes everything pop. And the best part? This is all without the use of RTX. I mean, it's in the game, but I could barely notice a difference between it being on or off, so I kept it off for that silky frame rate. Another big improvement Insomniac made was with the animations. The biggest issue I had in the 2016 reboot was how stiff the characters were. It was especially noticeable with dialogue, where they had this uncanny blank expression. Ugh. In Rift Apart, Insomniac addressed it by completely redoing all character models from scratch with an emphasis on stretch and squash in their expressions. That allowed for all cutscenes in the game to be done in-engine. No more pre-rendered stuff we had before. The whole game, from start to finish, is this unified experience between story moments and normal gameplay. I can't stress enough how big of an impact it makes on my immersion into this world. The animations for all the characters, Ratchet, Clank, Rivet, all sorts of enemies and NPCs, they're done so well that it feels like you're actually living through this story. Hey sir, are you are you alright? Welcome to photo mode. Here you get to play around with the camera and characters to snap some pretty cool shots. You can change their expressions, poses, what weapons they hold, you can add all sorts of effects and lighting, and even change the time of day on the planets to get the best looking shots. I used it to capture my thumbnail, so yeah, it's a pretty useful tool. And also it's just a great way to mess around in your free time. Real talk, when I was capturing that footage, I couldn't stop laughing the whole time. I'll miss you, T-Pose bot. At least I'll have this one moment with you captured forever. But sheer fidelity alone doesn't fully define this game as next gen. The PlayStation 5 launched with a built-in SSD, the biggest selling point being how much faster it is compared to hard drives used previously. And to showcase it, Rift Apart had to take full advantage of the new load times, and I think Insomniac drove many SSD sales with this one. The game is, in one word, seamless. Just a few moments ago, I mentioned how awesome it is to have all the cutscenes done in-engine. Now imagine how much better it feels when you transition from these cutscenes into gameplay and back again in one fluid motion without any load times or cuts to black. Insomniac did such a great job with the super short loading times that even from the main menu when you start a new game, it immediately goes into the first cutscene with the camera panning across the city. And the same happens with every cutscene. One moment you watch Ratchet get flung to a new location, the next you're controlling him and actually playing through that section. Then you reach a certain spot and the game takes you back into the story. But that's not all. The actual rifts are probably Insomniac's biggest flex here. In the starting section and across the game, when you enter a rift, the game loads a whole new location in moments. They play around with it a lot in the intro and use it as part of gameplay in later parts of the story. Like when you hit this purple rock to enter an alternate dimension on Blizzard Prime. That doesn't mean there's no loading at all though. I can't say much about the PS5, but on PC, I did have to wait a second or two when a cutscene ends before you go to a new planet, or when actually changing planets from the ship. But the load times are so short that it means when you boot up the game, you spend the vast majority of it actually playing instead of waiting around. And let me talk about going between planets for a second. Ever since the first game, Ratchet & Clank's loading screens have been iconic. Every time you went to a new planet, the loading screen was masked by this animation of your ship flying through space. It was such a genius solution to hide the load times that they ended up using it in every mainline title, well, except for this mess. Yeah, for some reason the reboot only got the loading screens. I don't know what to say. It's just, why? Just why? Yeah, if it wasn't obvious enough, I really don't like the reboot. But now that loading times are all but gone, I kind of wondered if it was the end for that iconic sequence. But Insomniac thought one step ahead and came up with the best compromise. So let's see exactly how they implemented space travel here. We walk up to a ship and simply jump into it. Then we pick our planet and...
Here we go!
And then we can go right away. Gosh, you see what I'm saying? This is so freaking cool! Needless to say, I love how they still kept this bit and made it even better. To me, this shows just how much care they put into this game. And hey, since I'm already kind of talking about how the game actually plays... If I could condense my thoughts on how Rift Apart plays into one sentence, it would be this. It's a best-of collection in video game form. I feel like before working on Rift Apart, the team at Insomnia played every single title in the series, took the best aspects of each game, and then made them even better. The result? This is easily the best overall package I've seen from Insomniac in years. So let's go over these parts one by one. Starting with the most obvious, the movement system. Ratchet gets to keep his moveset and general gameplay style from the PS4 game. I noticed the controls are much snappier this time around though. However, I also quickly realized that the same old reliable jump strafing around and shooting doesn't work well this time. I feel like this is where I should mention that I'm playing on the hardest difficulty, Renegade Legend. I wouldn't be a series veteran if I didn't play every single game like that. So take everything I'll talk about with that asterisk in mind. In almost 20 years, this is the first time I felt the need to change up my gameplay and actually think when fighting. Enemies are plentiful and they are incredibly aggressive. And what surprised me even more is how smart they are when it comes to strategizing and reacting to what you do. They actually respond to the weapons you use and change their behavior accordingly. When you use the bouncer, they scatter so they don't get hit by the cluster bombs. They even call it out. That's a nice touch. And they always put pressure on you, forcing you to think on your feet and always switch up your approach to match the situation. What further helps this is the sheer variety of enemies you're up against. Most of the time, you'll find yourself fighting Emperor Nefarious' army, which I found to be a fantastic remake of the Tyrannoids from the third game, Up Your Arsenal. So Insomniac spared no resources when designing them to be the most varied in terms of behaviors and attacks. But there's still other creatures and factions you'll find yourself fighting, like the now rebranded Goons for Less or the Robot Pirates, each requiring a complete change of approach and further strategizing to not get overwhelmed. And when you get used to the mostly crowd control combat style, the game throws mini-bosses at you as a test of how well you've adapted to Rift Apart's new combat rhythm. This is taken to an even greater extent with the game's actual full-on bosses. They have really diverse movesets that feel like they're designed to actively force you to use everything down to the last shot and mechanic to take them down. Simply put, on Renegade Legend, this game is tough. So what tools are given to you by Insomniac to deal with this onslaught? Let's take a step back and talk about movement again. I mentioned that the main moveset is no longer effective as a way to dodge enemies, and Insomniac must have felt the same way. The players needed a way to actually dodge these attacks. So what did they give us to do it?
Alright, new guy, try out your Phantom Dash.
Phantom Dash?
Can't catch what doesn't temporarily exist.
This is Phantom Dash. It's Rift Apart's version of a dodge roll you would find in roguelikes like Dead Cells or Enter the Gungeon. What it does is make you phase out of reality for the moment after you use it. This makes you completely invincible against enemy attacks for as long as you're dashing. It sounds broken, but with how aggressive and precise the enemies have become, it manages to balance itself out nicely. And unlike the previous kind of brain-dead approach of jumping side to side and holding shoot, Phantom Dash asks you to pay attention to enemy attacks and think to use it. It also feels incredibly rewarding, because the game requires you to be skilled enough to dish out damage without taking any hits yourself. Insomniac, if any guys from your team are watching this video, please keep it in future games. It's awesome. Another bit of help you'll find are these rifts that glow yellow when you're in their use distance. They let you quickly pull yourself onto another side of the arena to get some breathing room between you and your enemies. I've always felt like the swing shot was criminally left out of combat, being only kept as a tool for platforming. And I'm pretty happy with the way Insomniac finally gave it some combat utility. There are still 2 pieces left to the movement though. Unlocking Phantom Dash also gives you the ability to run on certain surfaces. In concept, it's amazing, but in execution, well, I've only used it in the arena once and then kept relying on other, arguably better tools. It's a neat mechanic and it adds a lot of variety to some platforming sections, but in combat it's way too situational, so yeah, can't have it all. The last one is super interesting though. When you reach Savali, you unlock the hover boots, and they are completely different this time around. Ever since the second game, Going Commando, I've always felt that they were a bit too powerful, especially in a cracking time, where the moment you unlocked them, there was no reason not to use them pretty much all the time. The way the hover boots work in Rift Apart is by needing you to first wind them up before you can go at full speed. This solution is genius, because it keeps the hover boots as a really strong movement tool that requires you to fully commit each time you use them, meaning you can't just spam them mid-combat. So yeah, if me talking this much about the movement system alone hasn't made it obvious, there is a lot to enjoy here. But that's not the biggest draw of Ratchet & Clank games. Oh no, it always was, has been, and will be the weapons. Ever since Tools of Destruction, I've had this lingering feeling that the arsenal of Ratchet & Clank games has gotten rather stale. And for the people who aren't playing literally every single new game in the series, that's perfectly fine. But for someone like me, using the same weapon archetypes and sometimes even the same weapons made everything melt into this one gray mush. Something tells me Insomniac felt the same way, which is why I'm happy to say that for the most part, the weapons in Rift Apart are completely different. And most importantly, they are amazing. Let's start with the most obvious change in the design philosophy for these weapons. Insomniac leaned much more into giving each weapon a specialized function, making them more situational. Let me give you a couple examples. The Negatron Collider is a beam of energy that looks really powerful. In reality though, it doesn't deal that much direct damage. Instead, it disintegrates all incoming shots, giving you a pocket of safety in an intense fight. The Ricochet, on the other hand, shoots a ball that can hit the same enemy several times over until they die with each press of the fire button. It's super useful because you can still fire it even when phantom dashing, which normally restricts you from using your weapons. These weapons are already pretty great, and the best part is that they can get even better. For context, weapon leveling is another core pillar of Ratchet & Clank's progression. It was first introduced alongside the modern strafe-based gameplay in Going Commando. When any given weapon reaches maximum level, it changes its appearance and gets a special function. As an example, let's take my favorite weapon in the game, the Black Hole Storm. It's Rift Apart's own take on the minigun, and for the most part, it behaves accordingly. But at level 5, it turns into the Black Hole Vortex. Its core function mostly stays the same, but now when you kill an enemy, it does this.
Leave it to us, Jump Pot.
Okay, I will just stay down here and watch you.
And the best part is, every weapon gets to go through this upgrade process. Here's another great example, the Headhunter. At max level, it turns into the Migraine, this big, beautiful sniper rifle that can stack up to 3 shots into one powerful burst. Insomniac also put a greater emphasis on the weapon's status effects. There are way more weapons that create some kind of lingering effect this time around. I'm pretty sure this was done to help combat the insane aggression of the enemies, and there's still a layer of strategy attached to them either because of their specialized use cases or limited ammo counts. I ended up reserving the quick select menu on the D-pad to weapons like the Aegis of Doom and the Bombardier to quickly deploy them before switching to my main damage dealers using the weapon wheel. Bonus points for making the weapon wheel fully customizable, thank you. Unfortunately, with an arsenal as big and varied as this one, weapons like the Blaster or Mr. Fungi, this game's take on Mr. Zircon, feel pretty useless after you purchase better weapons. Personally, I ended up almost never using them in both of my playthroughs. Yeah, I know, I missed the dual Vipers from Deadlock 2. But to be fair to both of them, they can be salvaged thanks to the Raritanium upgrade system. You're given a tree of perks that give weapons their unique attributes and enhance their performance. More damage, more ammo, higher range, that kind of stuff. This means great weapons like the Migraine become even more powerful, while the more lacking options like the Blaster can be brought up to par with the rest of the arsenal, given you have enough Raritanium, when normally it would be better spent elsewhere. But as resources become less and less of an issue, eventually you end up with an arsenal where each weapon is useful and fulfills their role exceptionally well. This means that with this system, every player can have their own personal favorite weapons without there being any obviously bad options. As far as Ratchet & Clank arsenals go, this one is close to perfection. In between combat sections, you get to explore different planets and go through platforming challenges. And thanks to the robust movement system, it all feels great. There aren't that many sections on the planets themselves that are full-on platforming, but Insomniac solved this deficiency by creating dimensional pockets that give you that extra challenge if you want to earn pieces of armor. Hold that thought, I'll get back to it in a bit. My personal favorites of the exploration sections have to be the hover boots challenges on Savali that remind me of A Crack in Time, and the zero gravity sections on Blizzard Prime, making their triumphant comeback from Into the Nexus. There's even more gameplay styles that make their comeback from past titles. Ship combat is back, but this time instead of a ship, you're controlling Trudy, this flying dragon-type creature. I mean, yeah, she's not an actual ship, but close enough. Another returning staple of the franchise is the New Game Plus mode, which here is probably second only to Deadlocked. I ended up recording all of my footage in New Game Plus because it still feels like beating the game from scratch, just with a new set of mechanics and challenges you go up against. For the average player, it'll take them around 3 to 4 replays to complete Rift Apart. That means unlocking and fully upgrading every Omega weapon, maxing out your health bar, and getting all of the collectibles. And I adore the way they did collectibles in this game. One system that's notably missing from this game is armor upgrades. Instead, it's replaced with an armor collection system that unlocks passive bonuses based on armor sets you find around the game. This system is taken almost directly from Size Matters. You know, that horrible spin-off on the PlayStation Portable nobody likes. This means you can have separate helmets, chests, and leg pieces. But the one thing they changed was get rid of the requirement to actually wear the full set to have its bonus effect applied to you. This is great for someone like me who finds the final armor upgrades, for lack of a better word, unbearably ugly. They also happen to look really edgy, like, yeah, look at this robot suit that's all red and cool and pointy, and I can't even see Ratchet's face most of the time. In the past entries, I just used the second to last upgrade and only unlocked the final stage for an achievement. And it feels great that I can finally fashion myself out however I please. You can also change the individual colors of each armor piece, taking that customization even further. As another nice touch, the armor you wear on Ratchet and Rivet is separate, so you don't have to go back every single time to change your appearance. I'll do you one better. Insomniac actually thought of the helmet piece covering up the characters' faces, so when we enter cutscenes, the helmet gets automatically taken off. And during gameplay, if a helmet covers up the character's mouth, their voice gets more muffled. Another nice touch.
Alright, looks like the sky's clear of snipers. Let's move.
I still wish we could have had some sort of classic look for Ratchet. In other words, I want to take off that stupid orange shirt. But since it's not an option here, I put on the second best thing I could find, which is his armor from Going Commando. Come on, you can't tell me it doesn't look absolutely fantastic. Also, I can't take off his shirt, so making him go Commando is an okay compromise in my eyes. See what I mean by calling this game a best stuff of this series? Everything I've talked about is something that was present in previous games in one form or another, but they're all polished up or reworked to fit Rift Apart perfectly. And since I mentioned collectibles, I guess I should close this section off by mentioning the other items and bonuses. The gold balls are probably just as iconic to Ratchet & Clank as, well, everything I've talked about until now. They're hidden around the planets, and finding them unlocks skins and other bonus goodies and cheats. There's also Lombax orbs, or Lorbs. Found on Savali, they're used as a flurry of references to other Sony IPs.
Dimension 242Y8, quite possibly the cutest dimension I've ever seen. Oh, the inhabitants were all made out of wool, I think. They could literally make anything. And there was a really pleasant voice following me around everywhere. Oh, it was incredible. Oh, and what's even better? I think I'm finally close to mapping my last dimension.
This one really hurts. You'll be sorely missed. The final collectible I have to mention are the infobots. They will give you extra lore behind this dimension and its various inhabitants. But there's a different, much more interesting function to these infobots, because finding all of them unlocks the R.Y.N.O. For those of you who aren't accustomed to Ratchet & Clank, the R.Y.N.O is meant to be the most devastating weapon in the whole game. Each title had its very own version of this R.Y.N.O. In Ratchet & Clank 1, it was a super-powered rocket launcher. The R.Y.N.O 2 was more akin to an evolution of the original, with even more ammo to let you clean out entire planets no problem. This evolution of the most powerful weapon would continue until they arrived at the R.Y.N.O 5, easily its most famous iteration. What also changed was the way you acquired the weapon. In the earlier titles, the R.Y.N.O could be purchased for bolts, either during the first playthrough or as bonus content for New Game Plus. But in the future trilogy, they changed it to being an unlockable you get for collecting its schematics. All this brings me to Rift Apart's R.Y.N.O Infinite. It shoots rifts that send down objects from other dimensions to cause massive explosions, dealing huge splash damage. What I like about it is that it's not just a win the game button. You still need to put effort into aiming it because the central rift deals the highest damage to your target, and its ammo can only be replenished through a vendor, so you can't mindlessly spam it. But what sets this R.Y.N.O apart from the rest of the arsenal is how quick it is to dish out huge damage in a wide area. I also like how Insomniac used it as a way to add cameos from other Sony-owned IPs. Oh hey, I knew we'd have Sly Cooper on the PS5. But what I especially appreciate about it is the way you unlock it. I already mentioned that you first obtain it by collecting all of the infobots scattered around the game, just like in the newer titles. But when you enter New Game Plus, you get an option to upgrade your entire arsenal to their Omega variants, giving each weapon 5 more levels and more raritanium upgrades. And here, the Omega version of the R.Y.N.O Infinite costs exactly 1 million bolts, which is the same as in going Commando. I have no other words for it, it's just such an awesome way to appeal to both new and old fans of the series. And added on top is how the high price of the Omega weapons plays into the new gameplay loop of New Game Plus. For each subsequent playthrough of the game, you get a bolt multiplier. It goes up from ×2 to ×20 the more enemies you manage to kill. But if you take any damage, that multiplier is then reset back to 1. So the game actively rewards you for your skill by letting you unlock everything faster just by being good with all the mechanics it's given you. All of these things combined make Rift Apart easily the most satisfying and rewarding game in the whole series, and I've only covered the core gameplay. Yeah, imagine that, there's still more to it. At some points of the story, you'll find terminals that are overgrown with a purple sludge. This is where you get to play through a new minigame.
Yeah, hi. You must be Glitch. I'm Ratchet. Sorry for all the jostling around earlier. Things aren't exactly going well, and... Actually, I think you're the only one who can help me right now. Thanks.
This is Glitch. She's this game's version of a vehicle combat section. The goal of this minigame is to clear out the virus infecting the computer in a more or less classic shoot-'em-up fashion. It's very straightforward. You get 2 full auto guns for the smaller enemies and a rocket launcher to remove infested clusters. Halfway through the game, you also unlock an energy pulse you can use in a pinch to clear out a large group of enemies. I can't say I enjoy these sections too much, but I understand why Insomniac included them. They're a neat pace breaker so you don't get bored with only Ratchet's gameplay. I also really like how Glitch can easily walk on walls and ceilings, making for some interesting encounters. Still, compared to what I'll be covering next, this gameplay style feels a bit weak. That's why I'm glad Insomniac included a skip button for these sections in particular. It gives people more options with how they want to play through the game without trivializing it. Though keep in mind, in order to get all of the collectibles and achievements, you'll have to play through all of her sections. I would have honestly given these sections a lot more praise if it wasn't for that other game mode. After all, this is Ratchet and Clank. So let's see how Clank plays this time around.
Okay. Do not enter. Got it.
May I take a look? I have some experience with dimensional anomalies.
Sure.
While Ratchet gets the more action platformer side of the games, Clank sections usually revolve around some kind of puzzle. This game is no exception. Here we get Rift Anomalies. When Clank enters an anomaly, he's presented with a set of obstacles and his copies running in a straight line. The goal of this puzzle is to get these copies to the door at the end so you can move on to the next section. To get them to the end, you have to first fully explore the environment for orbs that give you different effects. The orbs can also be used to change up the environment, either raising or lowering hazards, powering up parts of the map, or activating cables that let Clank and his copies move quickly from one end to the other. This is a simple premise, but it makes for easily the best puzzle sections in the entire series. even better than the temporal recording sections in A Crack in Time. Because the stream of Clanks is constant, you don't feel frustrated for messing up since there's no need to reset. But the puzzles are still demanding enough for you to need to take a step back and actually think the whole thing through. And unlike Glitch's sections, Clank's levels still use the foundation of the regular gameplay, so the switch between Ratchet and Clank feels more natural. And as such, even though the option is still there, I prefer not to skip these puzzles because of how much I enjoy them.
One step at a time. Focus on what's in front of you. That's it, Clank! You've repaired the anomaly! And now we're one step closer to stopping the dimensional cataclysm.
All these points I talked about make Rift Apart easily my favorite game in the series to actually play. I still can't believe I'm saying this, but this is the first time in Ratchet & Clank's history where I feel like there's no truly bad aspects to its gameplay. I mean, sure, Glitch's shoot 'em up isn't my favorite, but it's still fine for what it is. So where does it leave us? The movement, the weapons, all the different gameplay loops and styles, the difficulty, the collectibles, the replayability, all of them are excellent. And I feel like it's thanks to Insomniac paying such a high level of respect to the series past that Rift Apart came out as good as it did. I think after I'm done with this video, which seems to be a very long time from now, I'm still gonna replay it every now and then just for the fun of it. But since there's no more gameplay stuff left for me to talk about, how about we talk about the actual story? Before I move into talking about all the juicy story bits, I feel like I should give you folks a spoiler warning. I won't be getting into all the crucial twists and details, and I'll try to be as general as possible. But still, I highly recommend you experience Rift Apart's story on your own. If you still want to continue watching this video, you can skip ahead to this time code on the screen. Now that that's out of the way, let's get into it. We start the game and we're immediately introduced to a world where Nefarious has taken over. This is also where we get introduced to Rivet, who seems to be on an undercover mission. And just as it starts to go wrong, the perspective switches to Ratchet. It's been a while since the events of Into the Nexus. Clank throws Ratchet a big parade to celebrate their past adventures. But what he really uses this event for is to gift Ratchet a rebuild Dimensionator, which means Ratchet finally can find the other Lombaxes, something he wanted but ultimately gave up on at the end of the Future series. But before Ratchet even has a chance to react, the event gets invaded by Dr. Nefarious. At the end of their fight, they end up in the dimension from the first cutscene, and then the Dimensionator explodes. This traps our heroes in this dimension and causes dimensional anomalies to appear all over the world. Ratchet and Clank get separated in the explosion, and the whole game revolves around reuniting the duo, defeating Nefarious, and finding a way home. The overall story of Rift Apart is pretty refreshing. Despite all the complications that come with stuff like the multiverse, Insomniac kept things as simple as possible. That simple foundation is what allowed them to better use their resources on fleshing out the world building and especially the main characters. I've gotten sick of how convoluted and high stakes the Future series ended up being, and I'm glad that here, they kinda dropped the whole chosen one shtick and instead made everything a bit more grounded. I mean, as grounded as you can be when you're saving the multiverse, but I digress. It's just nice to see the more classic style planet hopping adventure formula make a return here. Though what makes Rift Apart's story so interesting to me is what they did with the series newcomers Rivet and Kit. I'll be honest, I was very nervous about how Insomniac would go about the writing for Rivet and Kit's story. It's pretty obvious that they're meant to be a direct mirror to what Ratchet and Clank went through in the first game. I had my reasons to be concerned. Their attempt to do something similar in 2016, well, you know the rest. But I was pleasantly surprised. Insomniac actually created a fantastic way to reflect on Ratchet and Clank's story and relationship. So what's different about Rivet and Kit? For starters, they're both well experienced in their world. Part of the charm of the original story was how everything was new to our heroes. Ratchet had no way of getting out of Veldin, and Clank at that point was literally born yesterday. So it was really cool to see how we explored the different planets and met all sorts of people for the very first time. Here though, especially with Rivet, they already know what the world around them is like, and their adventure is instead about breaking their preconceptions. Rivet hates robots for obvious reasons, so it was nice to see how distrusting she is with Clank at first. and how when she realizes he's here to help her out, she has to take a moment to kind of question everything. And speaking of Clank, it's nice to see how with the premise of the story, we almost get back to square one. To both Ratchet and Clank, this is a somewhat familiar but still completely different world, and I got real Ratchet 1 vibes from seeing them try figure everything out again. Going back to Rivet, I like how her experience is reflected in her personality. In Going Commando, we saw how Ratchet became more sarcastic about the universe as he figured it all out, but Rivet already starts off that way. But it's when she gets Clank as a partner that we see her flaws show through. The whole first act when Clank is with her, she has to learn to actually put more trust in other people. That's why it's so sweet to see her show genuine remorse after probing Clank's memories, even though she had no qualms with doing it just moments before. And things get only more interesting when Kit is brought into the picture. Just like Rivet, she's also pretty experienced in this universe, and unlike Clank, who was brought to the Great Clock against his will and ultimately gave up control over it to Sigmund, she actually followed through with her calling and became the caretaker of the Dimensional Archive on Savali. I like the touch where the iconic duo first has to go on an adventure with their counterparts. Clank has to go with Rivet, and Ratchet finds Kit when Nefarious' army attacks the Archive. So they kind of spend the first half of the game preparing to reunite, or, in case of Rivet and Kit, preparing to go on their first journey together. Another difference that sets Kit apart from Clank is how in the whole series it's proven that, like the Golden Bolt said, Clank is always right. But in this game with Kit, the whole story's conflict is about her being wrong, mostly about herself and her role in this world. Also, Rivet is cute, and I really like the moments where she and Ratchet said the exact same things in the exact same way.
Sorry.
I know it's a very on-the-nose, oh look, they're each other's counterparts, woo! But the way they did it is just, it's so sweet. Come on guys, I love it, I love them. But what caught me off guard about Rift Apart is how well Insomniac handled the inevitable conflict between our heroes. In the first game, after Clank falls for Quark's obvious betrayal and drags Ratchet down with him, Ratchet then spends most of the game being genuinely pissed at Clank. And in some places, the way Ratchet treats Clank is pretty inexcusable.
Well, go on. Go fight some evil.
At least I'm not a coward.
Whatever. As soon as I find Quark, I'm selling you for scrap.
We get it. You're angry, you want revenge on Quark, but don't treat Clank like a trash can for just being a bit too naive. He was literally born yesterday. And that was Ratchet's biggest flaw in the game. He was way too unreasonably hostile towards Clank. But that's also why it's so satisfying to watch Ratchet come to his senses again and realize that, yeah, in this completely alien universe full of greedy, hypocritical douchebags, Clank is his only true friend. I swear that last cutscene still brings me to tears every time I see it. It's so beautiful!
Hey, Tin Can!
Where do you think you're going? We, still need to fix that arm.
But with Rivet and Kit, they have a really good reason to have their conflict. The game very prominently teases it up until the point where everything comes crashing down, but both of them are the reason why they are the way they are. Because of Kit, Rivet became so abrasive and distrusting, and Kit, because of her encounter with Rivet, started doubting her entire existence and closed herself off in her new comfort zone on Savali. Not only does their whole development flip the original on its head, not only does it give the duo a tangible reason for their troubles, but the way it gets resolved is pretty much perfect. It's nice to see the thematic reflection between their final fight against Nefarious in this game and Chairman Drek in the original. And that's a really cool part of Rift Apart's story. It's always this mirror between Ratchet and Clank and Rivet and Kit. And all of these parts of the storyline and character arcs make Rift Apart feel both nostalgic and fresh. My favorite part about the story by far is how Insomniac allowed the characters to stop and take a moment to actually reflect on what they've been through. Throughout the whole game, there are these really personal moments where the characters get to open up. We have Ratchet wondering if finding the other Lombaxes is even worth it, or Rivet trying to move on from her trust issues and get used to not working alone. There's Kit, who keeps questioning her place in this world and if her past should define who she is right now. And finally, Clank is here trying to sort out this mess and deal with an ever-growing feeling of being responsible for all of it. And these moments aren't just mentioned as one-offs and then never brought up again. It's a consistent theme throughout the whole game. I particularly like how Insomniac used the quieter moments in the gameplay to have our characters talk it out. It makes for such a personal experience when you see them take a step back from all the over-the-top action and get real.
If it helps, Ratchet, I have never met my family either. Unless you count the Emperor. In which case, you cannot do any worse.
Probably not, but even if the Lombaxes are the best family ever, they could still be disappointed in me.
How? You are a hero.
I've hit a few bad guys, sure, but they invented so many brilliant things.
You sell yourself short.
Maybe, but I have a good life in my dimension, Kit, and I don't want to risk it.
And it's so satisfying to see how when we reach the end and win, it also serves as a resolution for all of their inner struggles. This is the kind of depth that makes Rift Apart's story really stand out to me. And establishing this truly personal connection between the player and the characters is probably Insomniac's greatest accomplishment here. Now, if only I could say the same about Nefarious. Look, before you take out your pitchforks, I get it. Nefarious is a fan favorite villain in this whole series. No one comes even close. Well, maybe except Gleeman Vox from Deadlocked. And I can't deny that his performance here is spot on.
A surveillance state covering the entire city. If only that blasted Dimensionator still worked.
Clank.
Huh?
Though this also extends to everyone's voice acting here. Everyone is obviously giving it their all and every character sounds incredible. The casting and performances are perfect. And yeah, Nefarious is mostly the same. He's pretty over the top, but he can still pose an actual threat when he wants to. When I first played through Rift Apart, it was really fun watching him on screen, but he's kind of unnecessary here. I mean, his motivations stay consistent with the goals he had in A Crack in Time, but I feel like anyone else could have pulled the trigger of the Dimensionator and things would have been largely the same. And what sucks even more is to see how little of an actual impact on the story he has. I mean, sure, he does cause the whole dimensions falling apart thing, but what does he do after the fact? He only really sends troops our way before Medic from Team Fortress takes over. And oh boy do I have things to say about the Emperor. He doesn't get enough development or interactions with, well, anyone, really. And that's even weirder to me. This whole time they've been teasing him here and there. His first appearance is really cool too. But then his character takes a massive nosedive and stays like that until the end of the game. We're never actually shown what makes him such a formidable villain. In the first cutscene he's powerful, but then he never uses those same powers against us ever again. And outside of cutscenes in Nefarious City, he's barely even acknowledged. It's his dimension. Shouldn't he have a much bigger presence in his own freaking dimension? And the worst part about him is his total lack of any depth. He's probably the most shallow villain in this entire series. What's his motivation to go on his conquest? He's just evil and wants power? That's it? Even Zergo from Full Frontal Assault had more presence and nuance than this, and he was meant to be a complete joke. Everybody keeps taking jabs at them like, oh no, oh geez, how many times have I beaten this guy? Oh, and he just keeps coming back, oh no.
You think a crushing defeat is all it takes to stop me?
I mean, yes.
It takes what little impact they could have had and throws it completely out the window. The reason Nefarious worked in something like A Crack in Time is because people actually took him seriously. And most importantly, he took himself seriously. Here, he just feels like he's hamming it up for Ratchet and just wants to go on vacation more than anything. And this whole finding the Nefarious dimension happened to fall on his head. And throughout the whole game, his actions are less proactive and more reactive. This is the exact opposite of how he was in Up Your Arsenal in A Crack in Time, where he was the first to act with a fully calculated plan backing him up. Oh, and the way he just gives up and lets himself get pushed to the wayside when the Emperor appears? Jeez, man, what happened to you? Why didn't you even consider that maybe in a universe where you win, there would be another version of you doing the whole winning thing? Did Lawrence going on paternity leave affect you that badly? So yeah, Nefarious here is a mess. It just sucks to see how Insomniac couldn't let him go after a crack in time and ended up turning him into Robo Doofenshmirtz. And while that's happening, the Emperor somehow manages to be even worse. The only real caveat here, once again, is that they're just really fun to watch. And also their respective boss fights are fantastic. So overall, I think the story of Rifts Apart is, for the most part, excellent. Insomniac showed their absolute A-game when writing our heroes and their progression. It just sucks that when it came to our villains, they kind of dropped the ball. And it's disappointing to see their incredible performances and gameplay go to waste like that. At the very least, they have a really nice song in the credits. Oh, and speaking of music, if you've been paying attention throughout the whole video, you might have noticed that I haven't used a single track from Rift Apart for my background music, unless it was relevant to the gameplay. Well, that's honestly because I haven't really found the soundtrack for this game to be all that memorable. Now, I'm not saying it's bad. The tracks from the official album are pretty great. But something about the overall track list felt off to me. I've spent the past few months trying to figure it out. Heck, I even tried turning it into a whole video, but I just don't know that much about music to be able to pull it off. But hey, this video exists, so why not talk about it here instead? Given the whole big budget grand epic score of the newer games, the switch from industrial beats makes sense. On a surface level, it sounds way more high production than the comparatively scrappy mashes of the originals. That's why in the first game, when the stakes are at their highest level, its composer, David Bergeau, dropped the use of industrial samples and switched to a full-on orchestra. It makes sense, orchestral music has the highest emotional throughput. It's hard for me to even imagine taking something similar to, say, the theme from Novalis, and then putting it over the final boss. And when I dove further into this topic, I noticed that after this point, there already were signs of the whole series going in this direction. Starting with the very first track that meets us in Going Commando, we're met by classical instruments before the main beat drops. And ever since that moment, the funky beats of the original were fizzled out and replaced with orchestral music. On the one hand, great, now the games feel more like animated movies with their score, but I wouldn't say it's a good thing. You see, music plays a great part in setting the pace of your gameplay. The original tracks did it with the use of beats that had this punchy presence to them. And like a metronome, these beats would determine how fast or slow you should take the level. It worked to great effect, because they gave each level their unique flavor. And also because when you make music in the style of the originals, they tend to be great to listen to on their own. I find myself going through my favorite tracks from Ratchet 1 to Undeadlocked all the time. On the other hand, the orchestral approach of the newer games lacks that kick that used to define this whole series. It creates a great ambience, sure, but there are very few moments in Rift Apart that really stand out to me musically. The only tracks I can remember distinctly are the ones where Insomniac remembered how the originals were done and gave them the presence they desperately needed. The most notable tracks in this style are Sweet Home Sargasso, Glitch in the System, and Rift Puzzles that for some reason never made it into the official album. And that's why I think they should give the older style a revisit. These tracks are something that I'll actually remember compared to the majority of the music that just feels like ambience. And it's not like this more industrial, beat-centric sound of the originals can't have its own atmospheric moments. Take the first time you land on Gemlik Base in the original game. This is the moment where Ratchet is at his worst. He's laser focused on getting revenge on Quark, and he's treated Clank like complete garbage this whole time. He has no intentions to do anything remotely heroic. He's going pretty much on autopilot, fueled by his rage. So when we finally track down Quark and land on his base, we're met with this droning hum and what feels like the slowest heartbeat ever. And then it explodes into action as we enter the base and face some of the toughest encounters in the whole game. That makes for one of the most memorable locations in the entire series. So please Insomniac, add some kick to your music. It fits Ratchet way more than ambient orchestra. But there's still a bit more to Rift Apart's tracklist for me to talk about. Another part of the soundtrack that feels off is its repetition. There's only 19 tracks in the whole album. This means that great tracks like the combat theme on Blizzard Prime get reused for other sections, like the arena at Xerxes.
There's gotta be a way back around here.
And this kind of repetition is everywhere, meaning the entire game ends up sounding samey. This alone is probably why the music of Rift Apart was so forgettable to me. And the audio mixing only makes things worse. This one could be chalked up to me playing on PC, which is a point I'll talk about separately. But I noticed that the audio mixing in Rift Apart is pretty meh. The defaults end up drowning out the entire soundtrack. In more complex fights, the game devolves into a cacophony of explosions and voice lines, with the music being barely audible. This shows to me that this game needs some work in the audio mixing department. No wonder I can't remember much of the soundtrack, I probably couldn't even hear it properly the first time around. Like I said, the music is fine, but it just doesn't compare to what we had before. If we're gonna get a new Ratchet & Clank game after this, please Insomniac, I beg you, take inspiration from the originals and give its music a unique sound that's unlike anything else. And while you're at it, please pay some extra attention to the audio mixing. You've done it right before, you can do it again. I believe in you. And if we're actually gonna get a new Ratchet & Clank game, I hope Sony's commitment to shipping their games to PC also means that they get more love in terms of optimization. Because this port, well, let me just show you. When making a new game, the team in Insomniac pushes the infrastructure of each PlayStation almost to a breaking point. In a way, the fact that their games look and run so well on each console is kind of a miracle, one that required endless playtesting. That makes their games some of the hardest things to port onto other hardware. It was hard enough to port their PS2 titles over to the PS3. Deadlock comes to mind as an example of one such port going horribly wrong. Seriously, the PS3 version of Deadlocked is a source of endless memes. So you can only imagine how tough it would be to get something like Rift Apart to run well on PC. This task became the responsibility of the Dutch company Nixxes. By that point, they had proven themselves with their port of Spider-Man for the PS4, another Insomniac title. That port in particular was great, and it pushed them into the limelight as the prime candidate for porting Rift Apart. So, how did they do? Honestly, I'd say it turned out way better than I expected. The game generally manages to hit 120 FPS with my RTX 4060, and I haven't noticed any major slip-ups in normal gameplay. But as I kept playing, the issues kind of started piling on. Now I am gonna say first that I've experienced no issues with load times on my SSD. It's not as smooth as it is on the PS5, but that's okay. It's tolerable, and the level transitions still felt smooth enough. The problems I had mostly had to do with performance in some areas and bugs. Let's start with performance. Rift Apart is a very demanding game. To run it at a stable 60 FPS, you need a machine that's considered mid-tier by 2024 standards. A 1660 maybe, but a 1060 and older are out. And even then you might struggle, because with my RTX 4060, I had a generally lower frame rate on Blizzard Prime, averaging it around 80 FPS. But that's fine. For most people, this would be great. Where things get really bad is Torrent 4. I land on it, and on an RTX 4060, with DLSS upscaling and frame generation, I get around 54 frames per second. On a desert planet. I don't know why, I don't want to know why, but somehow a desert planet with a giant robot, some scrap heaps and a small trading town runs worse than a planet that's a bustling city, a planet that's a mangrove forest, and a planet that's completely underwater combined. Someone way more savvy in graphics than I am could probably have an explanation for it. But every time I land on Torrent 4 in particular, I want to run through it as quickly as possible so I don't have to suffer through the bad frame rate. And that's on a 4060. I can only imagine how bad it is on older and less powerful hardware. So okay, the game doesn't perform too well in some areas, that's fine, you know, it's tolerable at least. What I can't tolerate though is what happened to me with the most recent update. It introduced AMD FSR, another upscaling frame generation magic tool. And that's great, more options for more rigs. What's not great is that the update broke Nvidia's DLSS completely. Yup, you heard it right. The technology the game launched with is now completely broken. It seems fine for the most part, but that's until you do something like change levels, go in and out of a cutscene, buy new weapons, so these weird stuttery artifacts happen all the time. And in 2D cutscenes, like the announcements from Nefarious or the credit sequence, the screen has horrible tearing between each transition. To fix this, all you need to do is switch from NVIDIA DLSS to AMD FSR. AMD FSR on a NVIDIA card. And no, don't even think about running the game without either of them, because then your frame rate will absolutely tank. Halfway through the game, I also had an issue where the collision meshes on Savali broke completely, so Ratchet would just randomly dive into water while still being on the ground. I had to restart the game to fix that one. And if you're wondering what took me so long to get this video out, you can blame how this game handles being recorded by OBS. Simply put, it doesn't. I had to spend extra time to set up NVIDIA Shadowplay to get all of my footage. Though this is also where I should say thank you to Nixis, because with the way I set up Shadowplay, it's become way more convenient for me to use it than record through OBS. Thanks Nixis for unintentionally making my video production a better experience. Also, at the very end of the final cutscene, I was met with a building that didn't load in correctly. So I was looking at this weird clipping mess in the background when the game wanted me to feel happy for our heroes. This one hurts. All these issues aside, this is still the best case scenario of porting a game designed on very specific hardware. I just hope that Nixis still comes back with a patch that addresses these issues, so we can get a game that runs well on most recent hardware. I bet this would also just bring in way more players. With all these issues in mind, I can only easily recommend Rift Apart if you have a PS5. If you're on PC on the other hand, just remember to keep these things in mind when playing it. Everybody has a different experience, yours might be better, it might be worse. That's just the nature of PC gaming. Everybody's rigs are different, so their experiences are also different. But what I can say for sure without a single inkling of a doubt is that this game, Rift Apart, is still one of the best games out there. And Nixis, if you're listening, it deserves to be in nothing but the best shape it could ever be. This game is an achievement, a milestone in our industry. And I feel like this is something we should be celebrating and sharing with the future generations of gamers. I love Rift Apart for everything it does with the formula, and I don't think I'll get bored of it anytime soon. And that was Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. Phew! This was quite a monster of a video to work on. I hope you enjoyed this video just as much as I did making it. As for the whole series, I think there's still plenty of ideas Insomniac can explore in the future, so we can expect plenty of Ratchet & Clank games to come. Insomniac nailed so many things about Rift Apart. It's an incredible game to play through. And I mean, yeah, I've pointed out some issues with it here and there are some smaller things I could point out still, but they're just tiny nitpicks compared to the sheer overall quality on display here. Besides, it's nothing they can't address in the future. If you haven't gotten Rift Apart yet, do it. I can't recommend it enough, so I hope this video convinced you to play it if you still haven't decided on it. Ratchet & Clank means a lot to me personally, and I'm happy I can finally talk about this series I grew up with like this. It gives me the freedom to finally say how I feel about it in a way I can be proud of. And hey, since you've made it this far, why not give me feedback on the new style of my videos in the comments? What you like, what you don't like, I'm eager to listen to all of it and discuss the game further with you. This is where I think I should also make an important announcement. If you're enjoying the art you're seeing on screen, you can get something similar for yourself from my channel artist WINKY. I'm forever grateful to her for doing all of this stuff for me, and this is the least I can do to help her out. Oh, and tips are always appreciated. As for my channel, you can always do the usual: comment, like, subscribe, but only if you like my content. And if you want to be extra generous, you can hop over to my Patreon to drop me $1 or $2. You'll get access to exclusive posts, and your name will be featured in the credits for my videos. Of course, you don't have to do any of it. You watching my videos to the end is more than enough. Honestly though, I'm just really proud that I made a Ratchet & Clank video, let alone one as big as this one, without ever mentioning the word consumerism. Oh,